Hey, hey. Hello. Hey, Hannah, are you still at you're still at Ralph's, right?
Yeah, I'm still there, but I haven't been working,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
a lot
But
of stuff going on. But the
yeah,
flowers are there, which makes me happy.
I know. I missed it. I don't think I'm gonna be able to go back until because I'm gonna leave soon.
Right,
So
right.
I know. But you can get like goods and stuff through the drive-through. So that's
Yeah,
good.
every week I go and ask for the kids will only eat the banana bread with chocolate chips. So the
It's so
lady
good.
knows me by heart. Oh, I know three chocolate chip bananas.
I love it.
Oh man, we are in the final stretch. It's crazy. Rowan is in the room doing Minecraft, so or Roblox. Or Hello Neighbor. I don't even know what these things are. Rowan. Shh. So I guess firstly, I just want to say thank you guys so much for keeping up with your work. This is really hard with everything, the distractions and stuff. And I know I nudge you a little bit, but in general, I mean, you guys have been pretty amazing in terms of keeping up with the demand and whatnot. When I looked at my lab today and it was Swiss cheese, like the spreadsheet was Swiss cheese, and I wanted to cry because I've been like going in secretly into the lab with my coat, the lab coat on, and doing these like demo labs. And Kirsten's been out on the beach doing setups and trying to deliver these virtual, like, we're gonna go worm today, but we're really not. But you're gonna feel like you did, and it's So thank you. Thank you for sticking with us. Okay, so today we have our beginning portion of our symposium, our research symposium, which is exciting. I think we're going to start off with, I had Taylor's up, and so we'll start off with Taylor, and we'll go from there. I think the lineup, in case anybody, I know Claire has work, and so she's going to pop in a little later. So I'm going to put her at the back of the lineup. But does it sound good if we go Taylor, Sam, Melissa, Rachel, and then Claire?
Works for me.
Okay, that'll be the plan. All right, let me share screen. Rowan, Taylor is going to be speaking, so you have to be quiet. Okay, all right. Okay, take it away.
All right, so, and I have a feeling I'm not going to do this in under 8 minutes, so please kind of interrupt me if you need to.
Okay.
So I did the decline of large predators and its effects on ecosystems and biodiversity. So this is an idea that's been around for a long time. In the early 1900s, Charles Elton began to recognize that predators could exert important top-down controls on underlying animal populations. Shortly after him, although Leopold concluded that loss of large predators was a precursor to the eruption of wild ungulates and subsequent impacts to plant communities. Robert Payne coined the term trophic cascade, which we all know about, and then Nelson Hairston and his colleagues built upon the ideas of Elton and Leopold with their green world hypothesis, which suggested that predators maintain global plant biomass at high levels by limiting herbivore densities. So the effects of large predators are vast and varied. Everyone is unique, and the ecosystem that it plays a role in is also unique. So that is important. And then the purpose of this review is to examine the causes of predator loss, the impacts it has on ecosystems, review past conservation efforts, and then suggest management strategies going forward. So the three big reasons: persecution by humans, overhunting and fishing, and then habitat loss and degradation. So, I mean, they've always kind of been a target of ours for killing livestock. I mean, just in general, they kind of instill fear in us. Frank et al. Suggested that low abundance appeals to the human desire for rare and elusive, and fierceness and intelligence challenge sportsmen. As predators, they are competitors for game, and then they also kill livestock, like I said. So the issue of overhunting and fishing, this is a problem that's magnified by the fact that large predator species are K-selected animals with conservative life history traits. So they depend on their parents for several months or even years. They have delayed sexual maturity, so that's also a problem. And they require a large amount of energy for reproduction in general. So if conditions aren't right, they're unable to produce. And without protection, it's really hard for their numbers to make a comeback. Charlie, stop. I'm sorry, my dog sees someone outside. Habitat loss. Charlie, knock it off. Habitat loss and degradation. As we continue to divide the landscape and develop land, we take away land that these animals need for hunting, territory, mating, and to maintain genetics within their population. So impacts to ecosystems. Eights suggests that there's three key elements that we need to, or of ecological theory that we need to use to interpret patterns that suggest trophic downgrading. So this is trophic cascades, which we are all familiar with. Alternative stable states. And this occurs when perturbations of sufficient magnitude and direction push ecosystems from one basin of attraction to another. Tipping points or thresholds around which abrupt changes in ecosystem functions and structure occur often categorize transitions between alternative stable states. So this helps us recognize when these changes happen. And then connectivity holds that ecosystems are built around interaction webs within which every species can potentially influence many other species. These interactions include both biological processes and physiochemical processes, link species together at a variety of spatial scales and in a highly complex network. And then Michael Strickland did a study on carbon with and without predators being present, and his research showed that there was an increased carbon retention when predators are present, and this was by 1.5-fold. And that was mainly by influencing herbivore behavior by fear with predators there. And then Ortiz and all highlight the direct and indirect effects to ecosystems when which large predators are responsible for. And that's on the next slide. Thought he illustrated it really nicely, makes it clear. Oops. D. So you can see that their roles are positive, and that's by regulating prey populations, predator control. And then when we remove these predators, all these impacts are kind of negated. We lose their role in the ecosystem. So, you can go to the next one, Dee. So this was a study done in 5 national parks in the Western US. This left one, you can see there's just a general lack of smaller trees and shrubs. And this is without our predators present, areas that they don't frequent. And especially in, D and E, you can see there's a lot of erosion because those trees aren't being recruited. And then on the right, sorry, this was, I'm trying to find my notes. Sites that are at low risk of ungulates. So you can see that they are all still having tree recruitment and shrubs still growing. So those streams there are doing a lot better than on the left without those predators present. You can go to the next slide. So this is the dingo. I focused on the dingo and sharks just to do one terrestrial and one marine. So Letnick and all found in general that animals weighing over 100 kilograms were unaffected by dingoes, while species 1 to 100 decline in the presence of dingoes, and then those that weigh less than a kilogram often benefit from their presence. So this is important because they do so much damage to the livestock industry there, especially the sheep. And knowing this information kind of helps with management so they can see where they would be helpful and where they wouldn't. And their case is pretty complicated because they are ecosystem architects, but this is really influenced by the energy state. So if it's a time of high rain versus, their droughts, which seem to be getting more and more extreme, they're less effective during those times of drought. So that's also important to consider. Coleman examined the unintended cascading effects on forest mammal assemblages following lethal control of the dingo and comparing the same without the control. So they found that activity of herbivores and smaller mammals, as well as mesopredators like the red fox, were greater where the control was present, and understory vegetation was sparser. And then opposite of that, where there was no control, there was more diversity. Shrubs were able to grow, increased vegetation diversity as well. So they made a strong case. And I found this really interesting on the next, the dingo fence. So south of the fence, this is all sheep country is what they called it. And then north of the fence, that's mostly cattle. And the cattle don't seem to be affected as much because they're larger. And so south of this, they have, the dingo is considered a pest that they control by kind of extreme measures. Landowners are offered a reward for killing each one. They get $120. And they also just came up, I found yesterday, new proposed regulations where they want to redo some of the fences areas that have gotten weak. And then south of the fence, they want every property owner to put out baiting traps. And in the entire state of South Australia, they want to do aerial baiting, which they've never done before. And this is a problem because in South Australia, they have the purest dingoes on the continent. And most of them, they hybridize with domesticated or wild dogs. So this is a problem genetic-wise. And next one. So sharks, coral reefs, and the disruption of top-down controls. Rupert examined the relative and combined effects of the loss of sharks as top predators due to fishing and the bottom-up pulse disturbance events such as cyclones and bleaching as processes that structure reef fish communities. So prior to this, it was believed that sharks played a huge role, but a lot of the studies they took kind of a snapshot. They didn't study it over a long period of time. And because they're subjected to so many bottom-up disturbances, it's really hard to tell if it's the shark that's playing a role or if it's something else. But ultimately, they found a correlation between like lower mesopredator numbers and coral health with sharks present. So, and then Freddie did a survey in the Mediterranean Sea. They have 20 shark species, but they can only use 5 because the other species were so sparse. But they found a severe and rapid decline, and these patterns were pretty close to what they're seeing in the Gulf of Mexico and almost identical to what's happening in northwestern Atlantic. And then with this decline, they're also seeing a decline in diversity, not just of sharks, but everything that is present in those systems. So the figure on the bottom, either red is fished and the green is non-fished. And then these arrows on the bottom indicate a severe bleaching event. So they monitored it for years after. And you can see, obviously, in the non-fished, there are more sharks present over in C. And then B, the rate at which the reef was able to recover was a lot faster with the sharks present than without. So that's important. Possible management strategies, just in general, we need to increase research to identify the species of concern and then know just how the role that they play in structuring their ecosystem. For the dingo, need a better understanding of how they influence their ecosystems because there's so many different like biomes on the continent. Every one of them is going to be different. We also need options for Australia's rangeland because they pose such a threat to livestock. This is the #1 reason that they're taken out. So things like guard animals or fencing, whatever would, help the farmers. Community engagement, for the most part, they're seen just as a pest. They don't really see the benefits that they offer in terms of ecological processes or services that they provide. So I think engaging the community that way would be really helpful. And then changes in legislation. So they have the Wild Dog Destruction Act of 1921 and the Rural Lands Protection Act of 1998. And the second one, the Minister of Agriculture has the direct power to specify which areas they need control and which areas they can kind of waive it. So if he was to sign off, areas that are largely uninhabited or areas where they're just not really a problem, those could be refuges for them. Sharks, they found that marine protection areas were really helpful and they weren't species specific, so several species can benefit. Establishing these within a feasible range of a species of concern would be helpful. And then increasing tracking data so that we can determine the areas where they would be most beneficial and then gauge the success that we're having. And most importantly, changes to fishing regulations because that's largely how they're taking out. This is hard to regulate, really. You can't have someone on every boat to see if someone's following the rules or not, but some kind of change that way would be helpful. So that's it.
Sorry about that. I was just muting because he's not following the quiet rules. Well done. Good stuff. I like the contrast between terrestrial and aquatic. All right. I'm going to try and switch over. All right. So we got Sam up. All right. I may be quiet because I'm going to go on mute again because he's being vocal. When I'm up, Sam, if you are ready to go, just go, okay?
Yep. So mine's pretty brief just because of the time restraints, but it's Forsaken Fungi, the relationship between climate change and mushroom fruiting. And just to start with some background, the importance of fungi. Fungi are indicators of forest health. They can be signals of environmental stressors and are essential in nutrient cycling. Fungi is a crucial food source for wildlife and can aid in wildlife management. And there are immense cultural and societal significance surrounding the collection and use of fungi as medicinal. So fungi fruiting and reproduction. The fungi starts with a hyphae. The hyphae are branching filaments that make up the mycelium. And the mycelium acts as the root system of the fungi. It gathers nutrients and energy to form a fruiting body. And the purpose of the fruiting body is to drop spores, which are then dispersed by wind or animals. And this is just a figure showing a lot more in-depth life cycle of fungi, which can involve sexual or asexual reproduction. So the changes in climate change can result in increased rainfall and warmer and drier temperatures. A difference has occurred in the timing and the flushes of mushroom fruiting due to these and other environmental changes. So observations that have taken place in the United Kingdom discovered that fruiting started earlier and ended later in recent season compared to the last 20 years. And then here's a figure from that study showing the difference in normalized fruiting, like the day it began, residual days, and the estimated change over the course of 60 years. So human impact was also observed as changing fungi fruiting patterns. Evidence shows that an increase in nitrogen due to air pollution decreases the health and vitality of trees. Air pollution greatly influences ectomycorrhizal fungi. This is a group that has a symbiotic relationship with plant roots, and it relies on healthy roots to colonize. So if the health of the trees are compromised, then there's a decline in the species. And there's species-specific reaction to environmental changes. So the different ways in which fungi obtain carbohydrates and how environmental factors affect this can predict the change in fruiting. So researchers have observed this phenomenon within wood decaying or saprolytic fungi. And in contrast, ectomycorrhizal fungi tends to have fruitings that are more related to temporal and precipitation factors, because this more affects trees, rather when for saprolytic fungi, the leaf litter kind of depends on their health because they're decomposers. And in conclusion, fungi is an essential part of our ecosystem that performs many important functions. The plant, tree, animal, and soil community are deeply reliant on fungi, and the effects of climate change, some relating to human activity, have drastically altered the lives and fruiting of fungi. And then my sources.
Sorry, I thought I could figure out a way to unmute that way. Well done, good stuff. I have a question. So fungus I find to be fascinating, and I also feel like they're an organism that we're going to need to rely more and more on as the climate is changing. We have to think about like inoculating with ectomycorrhizal on a lot of the crop plants to kind of get through some of the drought, right? Do you think that from your research, the things that you've been finding, what people are doing, that they're not going to be a tool in our toolbox because of how they respond?
Like ectomycorrhizal fungi specifically?
Yeah, or any fungus in general that we have found helps in uptaking, you know, trace nutrients or transforming some nutrient, or like I said, you know, increasing the rhizosphere. And, you know, we've talked about being able to go out to third world countries where conditions maybe aren't as good and planting crops, but the crops aren't going to do well unless they have access to water. And so the, you know, inoculations with the fungus will help. But now I'm starting to think, after having read your paper, that maybe this isn't going to be some tool that we can have in the toolbox to help.
Yeah, I haven't seen that much about it. Like, honestly, it was kind of difficult to find even studies
Yeah.
on fungi, and most of them were like European countries and like done in like the 70s to 90s.
Yeah.
I feel like it's not something we explore much in like North America, like in the United States.
Yeah.
So
And then I guess also I was intrigued, you had mentioned truffles and their relationship with some of the small mammals, and voles and stuff will go after the truffles. And so I'm wondering, in your readings, did you find any like obligate mutualism, sort of like with the yucca yucca moth, fig fig wasp, that if we lost one, we would lose the other, or are they sort of just something that a generalist organism's gonna be?
well, I think it's said that like 80% of what the voles were eating, like in the Pacific Northwest, was the truffle spore carps. So I feel like that could potentially
Absolutely.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. I guess it didn't dawn on me. 80% is like the majority.
I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but like I feel like that number,
Wow.
like
Wow. I'm gonna have to dig in, no pun intended, dig into that a little bit, because yeah, voles, they're really important for, you know, we think of small mammals as nuisance oftentimes, you know, tied with disease and that sort of thing, carrying ticks, but they're food for they're food for raptors, and they're food
yeah,
for
I was gonna say raptors and larger
yeah,
predators.
mesocarnivores. Yeah. So, very interesting. Thank you for broadening the scope. Good stuff. Okay. So now we move on to Alyssa. I feel like on our last day, when we're like supposed to meet, our final exam day, maybe we should do like a bake-off. Maybe we should make some kind of therapeutic creation that represents class. I
Like a
say
live
this
bake-off?
like a what?
Like a live bake-off, like we're all
Oh
like,
no, not live. You should, my house would be a disaster.
Oh, I thought that's what you meant.
No, but if we could bring our creation, like, you know, those of you that have had me in wildlife, you know, I like take it to the next level with my cakes. But I'm wondering if maybe that's something we'll see how we feel next week. But if anybody's up for cooking some kind of crazy, fun, exciting, only if it doesn't stress people and it's therapy, we could reveal them to each other and eat while we're having coffee or something. All right. I digress. Sorry. Okay, Alyssa.
All right, so my presentation was Blooming in the Shadow of the Petroleum Pump, the Shrubby Reed Mustard and Other Endangered Species. So just to give you all a little bit of background information, fossil fuel extraction is a really well publicized and controversial topic, especially here in the United States. Most of our industry and henceforth our economy runs on fossil fuel. Oil in particular is important to our economy, so things like our transportation, supply chains, so like plastics, fertilizers, detergents, even paints have oil in their process to make them. And then like heating buildings, a lot of that is reliant on oil. The Western United States has a lot of oil shales pretty rich in it, and this often ends up conflicting with conservationist goals. So historically, the American West has had a troubled kind of history with resource extraction, the detriment of the environment and the indigenous people there, to things like the gold rushes in California, or the redirection of water to large cities like Las Vegas and Los Angeles, and the taking of land from Native Americans. It's kind of like we historically have this history of just taking kind of whatever we need from the land. And recently there have been an effort to kind of open up Western land for fossil fuel extraction, particularly in areas like Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. So I'm going to talk about a specific region, the Uinta Basin in Utah. On the map, this is a site with like the yellow patch. In Utah, it's a state that has the little lake in the middle. Well, large lake in the middle, that's Salt Lake. So yeah, if you can see that there. I guess I'm pointing to it on my screen, but y'all can't see that. But.
Hold on, I'm coming to the rescue.
All right.
No, yes,
Yep.
where?
Yep, that's the one to the bottom. Yeah, you got it. That's the Uinta Basin. So it's incredibly rich in oil shale, and I'll actually show y'all a picture in a minute of just how rich it is. And there are several hundred oil wells in production in the Uinta Basin. And there are currently also plans to develop like a $1.2 billion railway through the area to transport oil. Like there are a lot of other companies that want to develop there. And along with all these companies and industry happening, there's also the second largest Native American reservation in the US, which is the Uinta and Ouray Reservation. And they do allow well activity on the land. I think they have like 700 active wells in the Uinta Basin that's on reservation land, because it also helps fund their tribal government. But the presence of all this industry and the reservation means that there are around 12 different government agencies functioning in the area. So this can really slow things down when it comes to like trying to get anything done administratively with policy changes. It can be really difficult. So on the next slide, we have two maps. This just kind of shows how rich the Uinta Basin is in oil. So that darker green portion has a layer of oil shale more than 10 feet thick, which yields 25 gallons or more of oil per ton of oil shale. And then on the right is just kind of has the outline of the reservation, as well as like where the Ute tribes are located. You can see they kind of overlap a lot. Yeah. So why am I telling you all of this? Sorry, it's kind of to convey how oil extraction in the Uinta Basin is just an extremely complicated issue. And there are a lot of different factors that come into play. So behind all of these businesses and agencies and oil is a more nuanced problem. And that is the threat to rare endemic species in the area. So how are we going to handle these species conservation? Well, my thesis is of the 24 endangered plants in Utah, there are 2 found in the semi-barren Uinta Basin that are threatened by oil well activity. Understanding the specific threats they face from oil extraction could lead to better protection policies and thus increase plant and insect biodiversity in the area. And the 2 plants I'm going to be focusing on are the shrubby reed mustard and the Uinta hoopless cactus, Uinta Basin hoopless cactus, excuse me. So I'm going to tell y'all just a little bit about the plants themselves. Shrubby reed mustard is a small perennial herb with yellow-green to yellow flowers. The height is typically 6 to 12 inches, so it's pretty small, and it flowers in the spring. The Uinta Basin hoopless cactus, it's a small barrel cactus, and it has like these beautiful magenta flowers that y'all saw on the previous slide. It actually is a really small cactus, so it only grows from like 1.5 to 7 inches, and it also flowers in the spring. Shrubby reed mustard is found on small constrained shale beds between thicker sandstone beds. And it can grow in oil fields, but it's usually found in like prospective oil fields. And it prefers areas that have sparse vegetation. So there's not a lot of other plants around. The hookless cactus, it's found on coarse stream deposited soils. And it actually grows really well in oil fields and prospective oil fields. And it can grow well in vegetated areas, unlike the shrubby reed mustard. The current estimated population sizes for shrubby reed mustard is about 3,000 individuals, and for the hookless cactus, it's up to 30,000. But it's kind of also difficult for them to predict that because that specific species of hookless cactus was just differentiated from others in its genus in 2010. So they're still doing research on it now. So now we're going to go into the threats facing these species. Although the shrubby reed mustard can self-pollinate, its reproduction is more successful with pollinators, such as bees in the family Andrenidae and Halictidae, both of which are mostly ground nesting species. Again, like it's not like here where there's a bunch of trees around that pollinators can nest in. The flowers of the Uinta Basin hookless cactus are also a really important food source for native ground nesting bees in the Halictidae subfamily, which is actually a subfamily with Halictidae, which is the same family that pollinates, the shrubby reed mustard. So because they share like such similar pollinators, the ground nesting bees, they're likely to face similar threats to pollinators. And to the right, I have like a picture of a Halictidae, which is a sweat bee in a desert in Arizona. So the main threats to pollinators are infrastructure, and that comes in roads and dust. So the development of roads kind of that reach the oil well pads directly harms ground nesting bee species, as you can imagine. But dust from all the road dust, because it's such like an arid area, also really contributes to harm for the insects and the plants themselves. Although the exact mechanisms are not known, researchers think that it can decrease photosynthesis through interfering with stomatal opening and closing, leading to water loss. And it also could cause physical stress for the pollinators, if the dust is deposited on the flowers and the pollinators have a hard time like getting to the pollen. And the other kind of big threat to reproduction is just plant poachers, especially the hookless cactus, because it's so pretty, like people will go after it, which is really sad.
So are they poaching them for the cactus fruit? Are they like saguaro fruit or the fruits that we'll get in, say, Hannaford's? They have cactus fruit, the Opuntia. Or is it to like plant in their yards or something?
I think it's just, from what I was reading, it almost seemed like it was just because it was a rare species. So I don't know if they're trying to, I assume they would be trying to plant it.
Yeah, cultivate.
Anyway, but yeah, so it's a big problem out there, which is really unfortunate. We have that problem here in New York with like orchids and stuff. So maybe, in the Western regions with cactus.
Yeah.
So the other big threat is habitat loss and fragmentation. And oil wells were not really the first threat that these two species faced. Historically, building stone was also mined in the Uinta Basin, meaning that populations may have been declining for a while before humans kind of realized that these plants were endangered and that we have to start taking care of them. Herbivory from grazing cattle in the area can also be a little bit of an issue, but that's more of like a localized problem. In general, though, like oil well infrastructure is definitely the leading cause of habitat loss and fragmentation. The construction of well pads contributes directly to habitat loss, just because you're constructing these huge well pads. And then all of the roads, I have like a picture here of what the oil well pads look like. But you can see it just totally fragments the area, and you could have a lot of like habitat loss relating to it. The other big problem with this is that because of all the roads, it kind of acts as a corridor for invasive species to come in, and they can outcompete species like the shrubby reed mustard. They actually, and you can't really use herbicide on them because of potential non-target effects on rare species like the Uinta Basin hookless cactus. And the other kind of thing is that there are mycorrhizal associations, especially with the hookless cactus, that only are really prevalent in undisturbed soils. So while the hookless cactus can grow in well pads, it does do a lot better in areas that are undisturbed and don't have the well pads. And again, this is just another picture showing all the well pads and all the roads in the area that are just really fragmenting the landscape. So conservation efforts, the main conservation efforts are just policy and research. So the Bureau of Land Management has a distance requirement of 300 feet for surface soil disturbances to SRM, shrubby reed mustards. That's like building roads and building oil wells. But the problem is that dust can travel really, really far. And some studies in Southern California show that distances of 1,300 feet may be required to protect rare species from road dust. So the Bureau of Land Management, 300 feet is nothing. And then research. There are a lot of efforts to understand the reproductive and habitat requirements for both of these species for better protection of them. Studies suggest that potential well sites should be monitored for both the presence of shrubby reed mustard and related pollinators. And this would, as a kind of secondary effect, help the Uinta Basin hookless cactus as well, just because they have so many shared pollinators and habitat. Another big thing is greenhouse studies. So they're kind of planning for reintroduction in case these species don't make it, like in case disturbance just becomes too wide. So they want the conditions for germination in a greenhouse, and then also understanding the habitat, like do you need native soil? these ectomycorrhizal associations and plant community needs for reintroduction. And I just have some pictures of researchers that are working on it. So the big take home, the political and economic factors surrounding oil extraction, the main threat to these two species, are extremely complicated. And efforts to open up Western land for oil have been growing more intense. And with those efforts come proposals for increased infrastructure like that $1.2 billion railway. Although these challenges are really, really complicated, increased studies can, number one, predict the specific range of and threats to shrubby reed mustard in the hookless cactus. And two, identify the specific benefits of increased plant and pollinator biodiversity. And that allows for stronger policy protections and increased conservation efforts for these species in the future. The United States is not likely to part ways with oil or other petroleum extraction efforts anytime in the near future. But if we can navigate the conservation of species like the shrubby reed mustard and hookless cactus in areas that have so many stakeholders like this, then we will have a roadmap for conserving other species in high-stake areas in the future.
Well done. Thank you for putting like a face to the problem, like the issue at hand, right? So often we think of animals like out west, oftentimes it's pronghorn, charismatic megafauna, but it's really nice to see these lesser known organisms and how they're impacted by these big disturbances that's probably on the increase, even though I hope not. I was just reading something yesterday, totally digressing from this. Remember we were talking about rewilding. One of the articles that I was presenting gave the example of the pronghorn. And, they're the second fastest land animal on the planet, behind the cheetah. And then you might wonder, like, why the heck are they so fast? And it's because they lost, again, I'm thinking of out west where we see them. That's where this is coming from, but they lost their top predator. So they had evolved that speed, in the time when they had that top predator. Then they lost that top predator. So it totally has nothing to do, except location, with your project. But it just popped into my head that was just kind of interesting to me. In addition, I just saw something on Facebook today where they are continuing to bulldoze the mountains in the Southwest for the dam wall. And it just really hit me hard because, and I've told people this before, the reason I'm an ecologist was because of my desert class, the advanced ecology class that took me out west. And the place that I connected with the most is a place that you guys might not get a chance to see the way that I saw. And
Dr. Cardone.
No, don't cry. But if you get a chance and it's safe, Organ Pipe National Monument. And it's the only place in the US where you'll see the organ pipe cactus. But they're knocking them down and just plowing through even the mountain to get the wall up. But anyways, there's an oasis there, so your story speaks to the things that engaged me the most in becoming an ecologist. So I'm appreciative that you guys are aware that the little things, really do matter. So good stuff. All right. Good work. Now we're on to Rachel, who's gonna tell us a little bit about coastal concerns. I have it in two forms, Rachel, in case the conversion from Google Slides is off. I've got it in a PDF if we need to switch.
Okay.
Did anyone have any questions on any of the presentations so far? Okay. All right. Ready when you are.
Sorry. Okay. Coastal erosion is a natural phenomena. Ooh, okay. Sorry. Is a natural phenomena that goes. It's not bad per se if it's over a long period of time and it's slow. But what's happening now is it's being sped up by different factors, mostly being rising sea levels and then changing ocean currents. Glacial melting is one of the main contributors when it comes to a rising sea level. And the graph up top that I have shows that over the course of time from studies that the amount of ice sheets that are melting are increasing. And it's bringing the level up drastically. And then along with that is thermal expansion, where the water is getting warmer and therefore it's kind of giving the illusion that the water is rising because by just causing it to expand, and that's bringing more water up to the coasts and allowing for every wave and high tide that comes across, more of the land is exposed to the water than previously it would have been. So more sediment is being dragged away, even with just a passing wave. And then ocean and wind currents are changing because of climates that are readjusting to warming or cooling. And some places are getting drier when they were wet, and some places are becoming more wet where they were dry. So the climate of those areas is changing, which is causing a drastic change in warm air and ocean currents and cold, which is causing more intense and frequent storm surges. And the storm surge is shown on the bottom as when air is pushing and bringing water in, and it's spinning around to create that cyclone, which then goes in to make a hurricane, which will then sweep across the land. And even, I don't have it up right here, but storm tide is when the storm surge happens while at high tide. And both of these effects are natural on their own, just like coastal erosion is. But because of the rising sea level and the changing currents, it's becoming more intense and more frequent, which is causing more distress to the land and the populations, both plants and people that live there. And it's just causing a whole array of problems, especially for anyone who lives on the coast, damaging properties and just cliffs will be fully like washed or carved into the coast.
Yeah, they've actually had to move back lighthouses and things like that away from the edge.
Mm-hmm. And it's important that we keep on top of it and try to prevent or lessen the effects of it because of habitat loss, because there are in the wetlands ecosystem services that can help protect against coastal erosion, where the plants will even mitigate the effects of a wave washing, so any force would be dissipated. And in the graph, on the bar graph, it shows that mangroves and marshes, how it helps to mitigate the effects of the wave crashing and making sure that the land isn't as affected. So when we have these big storm surges or even just coastal, like more frequent coastal erosion, these mangroves and marshes are being destroyed and we're losing the protective nature of the habitats. So instead of having a place for sediment to accumulate, it's being washed away even faster because these habitats are dwindling or even completely gone. And anybody as a human population living behind it or near it or on the coast is going to be greatly at risk, as we can see by the pictures to the left, where that house or building is like the front porch of it is completely off ground because it's been washed away by these tides and storms, and families will have to move or relocate, and sometimes they won't ever be able to come back because the damage is so severe that their house could be completely washed away or torn if a tsunami came through. So they would be not only losing their homes, getting injuries, or even possibly losing their family members, they would be losing thousands, if not millions of dollars to damages, especially if they were so lucky to be able to go back to live in their home and to rebuild. They would be losing tons of money, and even businesses that have like Disneyland or sea shipping companies or water treatment plants, they're all affected the same way. And if we were to lose those businesses, our economy could plummet, because a lot of them, like tourist attractions, contribute significantly to a country's GDP. So if that business were to be completely lost, the country could economically suffer into a deep recession or even a depression, with the costs of rebuilding, the damages, and just the loss of revenue from losing that business.
Yeah, I don't know. Have you guys, I'm sorry to interrupt, Rachel. It just struck me that a few years ago I went to Galveston, which is kind of the coastal area near Houston, where everybody kind of goes out and can drive out on the beach, and that's just kind of what they do in Texas. But it's a city people flock to, and there's an abandoned hotel there. I can't remember what storm it was, but it had like a boat still stuck in it. The damages from these storms are just incredible. And you think about, like you're saying here, the economic losses. I remember just during the time when we had flooding up here, I remember our family, who has a second house on Ocean City in New Jersey, just shutting down the boardwalk and thinking about, the time it's going to take them to rebuild all of that stuff, and the economic losses to these places is it's huge. Yeah, I mean, it's something they have to really consider as they rebuild, like building smarter.
Tetrapods, current efforts and solutions. When I was originally writing my paper, I found a line in the article that said tetrapods were a sea barrier, and I looked it up and I found those pictures and I trusted it. Yeah, it is true. It's just interesting because tetrapods, they're four-legged animals too, but they're also supplemental sea barriers. So like a seawall, they're relatively new. I think I found a site from where I got the picture and it said it was in 2019. But anyway, in Japan specifically, they will put these behind seawalls to help allow the wall to stand and strengthen it from any incoming waves, like tsunami waves, specifically for Japan. That was
I learned something new. I thought maybe she she had turned and like started watching TV and it was, David Attenborough, and so tetrapods were on her mind. But she taught me something new.
Even I thought it was a fever dream when I was making the PowerPoint. But no, they're actually a form of barrier, which was interesting. Concrete, man-made, artificial, obviously. And then there's artificial sand dunes where, like when we protect against flooding, we'll put like sandbags out in front of rivers in our property. It's essentially that on a larger scale to help kind of keep the waves within a certain area, like trap them. And then the seawalls, which are just large concrete barriers to block any water. And again, with the tsunami barriers, the same thing. And sand refills, which there's an actual name for it, but I just forgot it. That's what the picture on the bottom is the U.S. Army will take tons and tons of sand and put them on the coast where beaches have been washed away. And none of these.
Sorry.
Hmm?
I was gonna say, I think the term is dredging.
Possibly, thank you.
Like,
And none of these efforts that we have in place currently are sustainable over the long period of time, because the sand refilling on the beaches cost $35 million and it is lost within the next storm or within a year. And seawalls with each crashing wave become weaker and weaker, and it takes a lot of maintenance to keep them at their best. And then the sand dunes getting washed away just like the sand refills. It's a good solution for what we have now, but it's a more resistant thing instead of like a resiliency where we're making room we're allowing the nature to take its course, but not allowing it to drastically affect the habitats or the populations that live along the coast. And some possible solutions are natural coast habitats, rehabilitating them, restoration, there we go, sorry, is restoring some wetland habitats, and because they have their natural, ecosystem services where they will protect against any of the waves and the erosion. Almost forgot that word. They will bind the sediment together within the root systems and just make it more compact, so it's incredibly hard to uproot it. And they actually allow for the accretion of more sediments, not just preventing everything from being washed away. And they actually diffuse the strength of waves, which I found quite interesting. And we can see the graph on the top right, is from the distance of the marsh edge, you can see the diameter of some of these stems and ramets. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. And the closer they are to the edge, the wider the diameter is.
That's awesome. That visual is so awesome. Look at the cross section. What a difference.
And the bottom right, the bottom right is from the same study. And it's showing, after their experiments, that the stems and the ramets, based off of like their size and their diameters, they actually do like diffuse the damages. So as the water passes through, the more harsh forces will be on the larger, and as it goes inland, it lessens, so they don't need to be so strong and thick in the center. And they have a different flexibility and breaking point. And it's wonderful that we can have this naturally. So if we were able to restore and protect and put more conservation on these habitats, we would be able to take nature's wonderful gift and keep using it to protect the coast and protect our populations. And I feel the best solution would be using both engineered and natural protectors. So allowing for these habitats to be on the coast, and then putting our engineered stuff like possible seawalls and tsunami prone areas, and just building further back to help a company allow room. So we're, instead of being more of a resistant population where we're like, the sea has to stop here because we want to live here, we allow for that nature to help settle out and disperse the waves, so we can still live on the coast and have our coastal businesses, but we're not putting everything in danger, and we're allowing for the coast to remain there longer than being constantly eroded away from these storms and sea level rising.
Excellent job. Good stuff. I agree. I think the best solution is using our ingenuity and innovations with what nature has given us naturally over time with their evolved strategies. So good stuff. Yeah, I mean, my mother-in-law, she's got a house that's 4 blocks on Ocean City away from the beach, and I have no idea why she decided to buy it. Every other time you go up there, the water is in the streets. It wasn't meant to be built on. It's meant to be barrier island, not housing strips. So yeah, definitely something to consider, because times are changing and that's the direction we're going. And last but not least, great job. That was great. Last but not least, we have Claire. Claire, you're still here, right?
Yep, I'm here.
All right. Righty, go for it.
Alrighty, so I did my paper was on the management of wild horses, the differences between the East and the West Coast. So East and Western, wild horses, they're both in the East and the West. They're not native to here. They were like 12,000 years ago, but then they went extinct. So they have no true natural predators. In the West, there's a lot of free land for them to roam on. So there's about 75,000 out there. And the herds in the East are much smaller, much more maintained. The large herd sizes in the West, they cause degradation of the ecosystem, and they take food away from some of the other grazing animals, like whether it be cattle that people are raising or like elk. And they're actually 2 different species. The Eastern is Equus calibus and the Western is Equus ferus. So the Eastern ones are a little bit smaller.
Are they the same as the mini horses that we hear about on those islands?
Yeah, that's what I did for the Chincoteague.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, that's what the calibus is. So Western, Equus ferus, they're managed by the BLM under the Wild Horses and Burros program. I could have talked about burros too. Those are kind of like donkeys, but they don't really have those on the East, so I just stuck with the horses. So there's about, like I said, just shy of 75,000 across 10 Western states. And this is on the left is the pamphlet that the BLM has on their website, all about the program, about how many that they have in the public lands, about how much it grows to. and some of the things that they do to take care of the populations. And it is a very expensive program for the BLM. And with the increasing population, the cost of the program keeps increasing. So like I said, some of the problems, there's more horses than the ecosystem can support because they don't have those natural predators. It degrades the rangeland habitat, like overgrazing of the shrubland. It takes the food away from the other ungulates, and it can put stress on the water supply in arid regions because a lot of the western states can be pretty arid. Currently, some of the things that they're working on is fertility control and adoption for them. And a lot of times they have to put the horses in holding pens in separate areas so that they don't, degrade the area that like the cattle are on and stuff.
Whoops.
So yeah, this is just an overview. This is a video. If we want to play like half of it, it's like 3 minutes long, so I don't think we have time for the whole thing. But it just kind of goes over the BLM's program. Maybe it won't work.
Yeah, I don't think, wait a minute, let me see. Oops. Apparently my computer is 100 years old.
If it doesn't, okay.
I don't know what it's trying to play in, but.
It's a YouTube link.
Is there anything I should Google to bring that up? No?
I'm just going to talk about the same things.
Okay, all right, go for it.
So a couple methods that they do is the herd management, holding pens, the contraceptive, the PZP, sale, and adoption.
Okay. Looks like maybe it just came through. Let's see.
Maybe. Let's see.
Tell me when to stop.
Okay. We'll stop after the helicopter.
So today we're actually doing a wild horse roundup. Gather, some people call them gather, some people call them roundups, but it's a wild horse roundup. We have.
Oh geez, I'm sorry. I was trying to.
That's okay. We don't really need it.
We'll just do a little.
I have another one that's more interesting than this.
Okay.
So today we're actually doing a wild horse roundup. Gather, some people call them gather, some people call them roundups, but it's a wild horse roundup. We have wild horses and burros in 9 of the 10 western states, excluding, say, Washington. But wild horses and burros are managed in each of these states. It's not a huge program, but it's a program that draws a lot of attention emotionally and public-wide. The contractors set up gather sites, like we're behind me, and these gather sites are portable panels that are brought in. We have wings made out of a burlap material where they'll have some wings, and they use helicopters to do this. And so the helicopters will bring the animals into these temporary capture sites, and it's very humanely done in the fact that animals aren't all roped, they're not choked down. And
That's good.
The way that it's done is we have what's called a prodder horse.
Yeah, so that's how they round them up, and that can be kind of controversial to use the helicopters, but I'll talk more about that in a second.
He's got a good name for the job he does. Gus Ward.
So first off, the herd management areas. These are the areas where the wild horses were originally found in the western states. So the goal is to try to keep the horses within these areas and them not to expand onto other land. As you can see, it takes up quite a bit of land, especially in Nevada. And it's 177 of them. And the goal is, so there's an AML, or appropriate management level, for each herd management area. And you don't want the number of horses to exceed that AML, and currently they're all being exceeded by quite a bit. So they put them in the holding pens, and they use the helicopters to get them there. And once the horses are in the holding pens, they have to be taken care of until they're either sold or they die. So this program costs $45.9 million a year, and the expanding population will cause the number to grow. And yeah, it's controversial because they use the helicopters, so some people don't think that that's humane, but it's definitely a problem. So contraceptives, the porcine zona pellucida. This is something that they use in the East too. It's injected into a female horse. It's from a pig, and it produces antibodies against the vaccine, which then block the sperm receptors for a year. And it costs about $24 per shot, and that has to be administered every year, but it's a 90% success rate, and it can save the BLM actually a lot of money in the long term. And this is just a chart that shows like a projected population of a study area in Wyoming, like how the population would decrease over time with the use of PCP.
I don't know if you guys remember for general ecology, but that's one of the options. We talked about it associated with biocontrol, just kind of manipulating their ability to reproduce. But we are using that around here with deer. It's just, there's so many deer versus the cost of this, that it's probably more effective on the horses than it is on deer, whitetails.
Yeah, it's the same concept. So what they do too is you can adopt a horse, and they actually give you money to adopt it. So you get $500 for adopting it and $500 for registering the horse. And the BLM like makes sure that the horse goes to a good home. Like they won't sell them to slaughter or anything like that. And then if they if a horse has gone up for adoption a bunch of times from a holding pen, they'll end up selling the horse sometimes just to get rid of them, so the holding pens don't get too overcrowded.
I assume their temperament's all over the place.
Yeah, you have to be really good with horses. It's not like going to buy your 5-year-old one. So what does the future hold? Decreased productivity of the ecosystem if left unmanaged. The new BLM budget is $1.2 billion, so there's hope that some of that money will be allocated towards the program for more research. And one of the articles I read talked about how people need to consider the ethics of how they do this, because it really is a problem. And a lot of people will, like protect the horses, like their symbol of freedom. But again, like you have to think about it, like, should they really be here? Like it's one of those things, like it's hard to walk the line. So in the East, it's a little bit different. I did like 2 study areas. They're right next to each other, Assateague and Chincoteague. And the Assateague is managed by the National Park Service, and Chincoteague is managed by the local fire department, actually.
Oh,
and it's easier to manage the horses because the herds are so much smaller.
Oops.
So Chincoteague, this is in Virginia. Some of the problems that occur here, most of them have to deal with the climate change, causing rise in sea level and less salt marsh for the ponies to graze on. And if there's too many ponies, then the salt marsh will disappear. So it's kind of a balance because they eat the salt marsh. And severe storms such as hurricanes can be a threat. And it's managed by the fire department. But this is a good video if we can get this one to work.
This plays in well with Rachel's last talk too. Thinking about horse management.
Learn and carry it on. We round them all up, takes about 4.5, 5 hours. We rest them that night in the crowd. Tuesday, we take our veterinarians over. The vets actually call out the ones that are too small to swim and the ones that are too old to swim. We put them in the truck and bring them across by trailer, them and their mothers. Wednesday is the world famous swim for the rest of the herd. We do it on a slack tide in the morning, the time when the tide is not moving either direction. It can be high water slack or low water slack. It doesn't matter.
The swim is something different all in itself. We heard everything out of the pen, both herds, north and south. We heard everything to the swim site. We hold them, they rest, and at low slack tide, when we get the signal, we start driving everything to the water.
Yeah, that's good on there.
7 minutes to swim, and we bring them on down.
Wow.
So, it's pretty cool in the East. It's a pretty big economic factor because a lot of people come to watch this pony swim every year. They just move them from one end of the island to the other. But it's a big tourist attraction, and the horses bring in a lot of money. So that like brings awareness to the horses, lets people know that they're there. They also use the PZP to control their populations. And after the pony swim, in this little festival that they have, they auction off some of the young, and the proceeds go back to the fire department, and then the fire department maintains the ponies. They develop a management plan, like all the fencing, if they need extra water, because some of these management areas, some of them can get really dry in the summer, and sometimes they have to be moved from other management areas because other species live there, and they don't want the horses to like knock out some of the endemic species.
Yeah, I suppose, like you said, it's an outreach thing too for kids and whatnot to
watch it. Yeah, I mean, I've never been there. My parents have been there before. They said it was pretty cool. So Assateague, this is on the Maryland side of the island, and it's just different because it's managed by the National Park Service, and they roam freely. They're not on. So in the map that we just saw, that was like the herd management areas, and they're fenced in there. But these ones can roam freely wherever they want on the island because they have a permit given to graze by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And this population is pretty small. There's only 150 adult horses, and they use PZP to control that. So conclusion, wild horse management in the West needs some serious work because the horse population continues to soar above the AMLs, and the program is becoming way too costly. And then wild pony management in the East is just generally easier because they're contained to islands, and the herds are so small that it's just easy to remove some or just administer the PZP pretty economically.
Well done. Good stuff. Claire, do you have horses?
No, I do not.
No, you just like them.
Yeah, I have friends that have them. I just thought it was an interesting topic.
Yeah, it is very interesting. I learned so much. Thank you, guys. This was great. So next time we meet, we're going to have one extra. We had to make a shift. So it'll be important for us to kind of keep our timing closer to that 10-minute window that we were mentioning. These were excellent. You guys are nailing them. So keep it up. The only other thing I wanted to make mention of, and I'm going to pull this up and share screen, is this, if you guys can see that. I've been getting some CC emails of those of you that have already done your peer reviews. That's awesome. Remember, we're trying to aim to turn in our finalized papers by the beginning of the week of final exams. So having feedback in advance of that, if you guys wanted to use peer feedback, would be great. But most of you have gone on to the shared Google Sheet and signed up. Again, this is the author, this is their email address, this is their research topic, and then this is where you would sign up to pick an article that was of interest to you. We're trying to not have a ton of redundancy. So for those that haven't signed up, look for the one that hasn't been taken yet. And until we get Casey's, we're still shy one. So somebody might end up having to review somebody else's paper that's been done already. But the key is open it up, read it, use track changes, kind of like I did for you guys. And then when you email it to the author to show them the feedback, make sure you CC me so I can give you those max points on being a good reviewer. Okay? Sound good?
I have a question.
All right. Have a great weekend, you guys. I'll see you on Tuesday for round 2. See ya.
Danielle, I have a question before you go.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Sorry. These are in a folder, right?
Yes, they are in a folder on Moodle. Yep.
Carly's isn't on there.
Find them so you can see.
Yeah, so I went on and Carly's isn't on there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll pull it in. Maybe go ahead.
An paper by Zach, somebody named Zach.
Oh, it's a lab report. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yes. I will go fix that. But yeah, I must have been doing 2 things at once. Let me show everybody who's still on who wanted to see where it was. So I put them, I believe, down. There's the peer review sheet. Here's the rough draft papers to peer review. And I kind of tried to make that header bold. So it's in topic 4 if you haven't had a chance to get to them yet. So you'd go to topic 4, you'd open this folder up. I'll add Carly's and shift out Zach's.
Oh, you know what? I see it now.
I've posted them in here. Oh.
Maybe I looked in the wrong thing.
Oh, you know, I betcha it was Zach Cutter as an example paper.
Oh, okay.
I had posted some example rough drafts and some example PowerPoints.
So under topic 8, you have a folder that says rough drafts for you to peer review as well.
Oh, thank you for letting, I'll have to hide them. That must be
That's what I opened.
carry over from a class prior, a semester or so. In topic 8, let me go find that.
Okay, so topic 4. Okay, I got it now.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Yes. That must be a different group. And I will hide it. Yeah, I put them up in the area where the section 4, I think I said. Thanks for letting me know. Sorry about that confusion.
No, thank you so much. That makes it easier.
All right.
Thank you, Danielle.
You bet. All right, you guys, miss you. I'll see you on Tuesday.